In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, most merciful, I'm very grateful to you, Her Excellency Ms. Jane Marriott, for taking time out from your busy schedule and come here and talk to us. I take this opportunity to also thank the other members of the diplomatic community who are here, the former ambassadors of Pakistan sitting here. Asif Durrani Sahab shared your appointment, special representative on Afghanistan. You were also one time with Mr. Holbrook. Shoaib Sadal Sahab is here. I don't know whether you know him or no. He is, okay, and he is heading the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, and especially on the minorities. My team here, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. We know it well that Pakistan-UK relationship date back to, I would say, centuries from two aspects. One, when subcontinent was part of British Empire, and later on after the independence of Pakistan. Pakistan remains a member of Commonwealth, and that is how she is termed High Commissioner of British United Kingdom to Pakistan. Our relationship is also augmented by the presence of a large number of diaspora, which is there, which is contributing in multiple ways into the economy and society of the United Kingdom. Ma'am, you know, the world is going through a very, very difficult period, transitionary period. There's so many conflicts brewing, so many conflicts going on, and there's so much which is happening in the neighborhood of Pakistan, especially Afghanistan and all. We are going ourselves through a very, very difficult situation that we face. I think initially we used to say two-front war. Now it is multi-front war. It is from abroad and from within as well. And from within, there are so many things which actually catalyze this whole thing inside Pakistan also, internal, external, and everything. In this difficult time, Pakistan looks forward to United Kingdom for United Kingdom's assistance in multiple ways in the development of society, which UK is already doing also, especially about the education and women empowerment and so many other areas. And similarly, I think there would be one area which I spoke to you also when we met in the British High Commission in your reception, that maybe UK could play a role, mediatory role between Pakistan and our neighbors, and resolve the issues for the good of humanity, for the good of this region, and for good of the world as well. Because anything happening in our neighborhood, for example, if there is a human catastrophe in Afghanistan, it is not only Pakistan which is going to be affected. Although Pakistan may be the first destination, maybe Iran or certain other neighboring countries, but ultimately everyone will spill out from here towards the, they would be touching, and I think they would be attempting to reach on the shores of European Union and Europe. The next issue, I think there is a problem going on, that is about the illegal immigration, which hurts UK, hurts EU, hurts Pakistan as well. So these are a few issues. We would love to hear from you, your views on Pakistan and UK relations and other things. Thank you so much once again for being here. Thank you.
Let me introduce. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to introduce our esteemed guest for today's session. Her Excellency Ms. Jane Marriott has been the British High Commissioner to Pakistan since July 2023. Prior to taking up her current position, she was the British High Commissioner to Kenya and Ambassador to Yemen. Ms. Marriott joined the UK government's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office in 2001, following roles in the Cabinet Office and Home Office. She has previously served as Director of the UK's Joint International Counterterrorism Unit, Joint FCDO, Director for the Middle East and North Africa, Ambassador to Yemen, Deputy and Acting Ambassador to Tehran, and an advisor to the US Special Representative to Afghanistan and Pakistan. She has also completed 2 postings to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan. She was appointed OBE in 2004 for services in Al Amara, Iraq, and CMG in 2023 for service to foreign policy. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our esteemed speaker.
Thank you very much indeed. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will attempt to answer some of those questions, but I'm also conscious that quite often the best exchanges are during the Q&A. So if I pause to remove chunks of my speech, that's to allow us to have a bit more time on Q&A. And I'm afraid, like quite a few people, I've got the cough. So if I also choke to death in the middle of my remarks, give me a second to have a quick drink, and I will be back with you. And my wonderful colleague Zoe, who is here, is prepped to give me CPR should I die on stage. Hopefully that will not happen today. But ladies and gentlemen, it is lovely to be here with you all today, and good to see so many current and former ambassadors in the audience. Thank you very much for your time on a Monday morning. I confess I'm looking a little bit more to the students behind you and the young professionals behind you because we constantly talk about the future. So actually I'm really interested in what you're interested in and what you have to say as well. I'd like to start by thanking our host, the Islamabad Policy Research Institute, for organising this event, and particularly, of course, your president, Dr. Reza Mohammed, for inviting me to share my own diplomatic reflections. As you just heard, I've served in His Majesty's government in many roles across the world for the last 25 years, having worked in the UK's diplomatic missions in Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, the US, Yemen, Kenya, and now, of course, Pakistan. I've got a fair few reflections and quite a few anecdotes that I'm happy to pull out during the Q&A. But today I've been asked to specifically talk about UK and Pakistan relations, but I would also like to cover some broader geopolitical points during this brief as well. 2024 has, I think, been testament to the enduring relationship between Pakistan and the UK. As you just heard, yes, our history goes back a very, very long way, but testament to this enduring relationship is, of course, cricket, which has demonstrated our shared love of sport. The test matches this year did not quite go in England's favour. The first one, legends were made. By the third one, I was a little bit late on the Saturday to go to the Pindi tour, and before I got out of the house, Pakistan's spin bowlers had annihilated the England team. So I'm still a bit sore about it, so don't rub it in too much. But I have been very much enjoying, in the 18 months I've been here, Pakistan's wonderful hospitality, its culture and food. And that was one of the key things that our England fans fed back, that Pakistan was a place that was unfamiliar to many of them. Many of them had had family members going, oh, don't go to Pakistan, it's not very safe. And every single one of them had had the most amazing time, had made many Pakistan friends along the way, and were going back as ambassadors for Pakistan, British, but going back as ambassadors for Pakistan to their friends and family to explain what a wonderful country this is. And as we look ahead to the next year, I'm looking forward to seeing what our countries can deliver and the work across a range of diplomatic, development, military and trade objectives. And I'd like to talk to you about some of these opportunities today, because I'm very lucky to oversee one of the biggest diplomatic networks in the world. Pakistan is still one of the most important countries for the UK, in spite of increasing competition from others. We have offices, yes, here in Islamabad, but also Karachi, Lahore, and I encourage my team, as well as myself, to get out and see as much of this country as possible and to meet a whole variety of people. As you mentioned, our diaspora links are very deep-rooted. We have 1.6 million Pakistani diaspora in the UK, and I make a point when I'm back in the UK of visiting some of those diaspora communities, hearing their concerns, which range from the practical, so the transportation of bodies between the countries, to long political discussions, which can sometimes get a little heated, as you can imagine. And at any point, there are about 100,000 Brits here in Pakistan, who sometimes causes consular bandwidth. So a lot of consular cases come out of those brilliant links between our people to people. We also have members of the diaspora who've taken on significant positions in the UK. It's probably too early in the morning to make a joke about reverse colonisation, but it is definitely true that the infiltration of the UK at the highest levels is a successful mission. whether you're talking about the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, the Lord Chancellor, Secretary of State for Justice, Shaban Mahmood, Ministers of State, including Lord Wajid Khan, the Pakistani diaspora, those Pakistani heritage in the UK, have reached the highest levels in UK society, reflecting their education, their expertise, and their enthusiasm for the United Kingdom. We also have 15 British Pakistani heritage MPs who joined following our elections in July. Pakistan continues to be an important regional and strategic partner for the UK, as well as a bilateral one. In November, we welcomed the first British minister from the new government, Hamish Falconer MP, to Pakistan. He is actually a former diplomat, and his first posting was to Pakistan 14 years ago. So he was absolutely delighted to be back here, very much felt that he was coming home, although he did give Zoe and I a heart failure when he said, "I think my motorbike is parked in the British compound somewhere. I wonder if I can ride on it." And we said, "I'm sorry, Minister, it's completely out of action. The motorcycle is broken." We were not having a minister riding around in the hills, the beautiful Margalla Hills, on his own there. Now, British ministers are fully aware that the world we find ourselves in today is contested, it's messy, and it quite often requires very difficult and balanced decisions. And our approach to addressing geopolitical challenges must therefore also continue to evolve and adapt. And for that reason, the UK's Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has set out his intention to pursue a foreign policy of progressive realism. Now, what does that mean? What is progressive realism? It sounds very nice. Well, it simply means using realistic means to pursue progressive ends. For the UK government, that requires a tough-minded honesty about the United Kingdom and our own role in the world, the balance of power in different regions, and the state of the world. Where can we best add value? What is our influence like as we enter 2025? And instead of cynically using that realistic analysis to accumulate power, as the UK has done in the past, progressive realism uses it in the service of progressive goals, some of which I want to talk to you about today, including climate mitigation, defending democracy, and economic development. And as the Foreign Secretary Lammy has said, we must address the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. And we need to work out what that increasingly looks like in a multipolar world. Now, the post-World War II system is being looked at afresh and has been for the last few years, and that is absolutely right. International systems that suited the world nearly a century ago must evolve to remain relevant. We live, as I say, in a multipolar world, although some also argue that it's a tripolar world with the US, India and China. Others would add the EU in as well, and making it quadripolar. Pakistan knows that better than anybody. You balance your relationships extraordinarily well. You had your Deputy Prime Minister in Mashhad meeting with the SCO, and you had your Prime Minister in Saudi Arabia meeting with President Macron. That is balancing your interests and your equities, and is not easy to do. But I think you see, as many countries do today, the importance of having relationships with all and balancing those interests. I also very briefly want to touch on huge corporations, which have differing accountability levels, of course, to countries, but many of which are more powerful than countries today and whose GDP is more powerful than many countries today. I actually tried to find some up-to-date statistics on this, but the last ones I could see were pre-COVID in 2020, where it talked about the major American corporations in particular, so your Facebooks, your Amazons, what is now X, having GDPs bigger than, in one case, Pakistan, and that was back in 2020. So there's a lot of corporations as well out there, and I'm happy to come back to that in the Q&A, who also need to be accountable for this world in which we're in today. But in an increasingly fraught world, we must respond by confronting challenges together. As British Prime Minister Keir Starmer recently said, in a more competitive and dangerous world, none of us can take anything for granted. And therefore, we need to work even harder with our partners, but also those who may not be our natural partners, to address global challenges. Our success in Britain, our success in Pakistan, and indeed our success in any country, can never be separated from events beyond our shores. Global challenges rebound on us at home. To grapple only with the effects of war, poverty, climate change, pandemics, migration, when they arrive on our doorstep, is to set ourselves up to fail. We need to have these conversations upstream early. And with that in mind, earlier this month, Prime Minister Starmer set out his intentions of an internationalist, confident, outward-looking and responsible British government that is committed to long-standing values such as stability, international law and the UN Charter, a government that is ready to lead globally. And those values have been well demonstrated, I think, by Prime Minister Starmer's approach to diplomacy. Our ministers, including the Prime Minister, have been working with partners across the world to deliver on this agenda, whether through formal groupings such as the G20, through and the UN Security Council, organisations such as the World Health Organization, or in ad hoc groups such as that convened a few days ago in Syria to discuss principles going forward. It also means engaging with countries such as China. Prime Minister Starmer met with Chinese President Xi in November, setting out that we want to engage honestly and frankly with China as a predictable, both of us as predictable, consistent sovereign actors. Similarly, the UK and Pakistan have remained steadfast partners. Our prime ministers sat down together at the UN General Assembly in New York and again at COP29. Our foreign secretaries are in regular contact, most recently meeting in London and Samoa to discuss how to bolster our bilateral friendship. And of course, as well as being close bilateral partners, the UK and Pakistan are also multilateral partners. We can achieve much together, and we can achieve even more through our positions on the global stage. And I'm thrilled to see that Pakistan's global offer is growing even stronger. We saw the power of Pakistan global leadership at COP27, when Pakistan took a leading role in establishing the Loss and Damage Fund. And over the last year, we've seen Pakistan position itself on the global stage, successfully hosting the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, heads of government meeting here in Islamabad, showcasing Pakistan's offer to the region and beyond. And as we approach 2025, Pakistan is preparing for further opportunities to exercise its global leadership. On the 1st of January, as you all know, Pakistan will commence its 2-year term on the UN Security Council. Elected for a very impressive 8th time, Pakistan is an experienced and valued UN operator. Expert diplomats in Islamabad and in New York have a deep understanding of the key Security Council files, and they will position Pakistan uniquely to navigate a council that can often be divided and perhaps even play a bridging role between the P5 powers. We should acknowledge the discord and difficulties currently on the UN Security Council. It is not working as well as it should, and that is not the fault of the UN. The UN can only ever be as strong as its constituent parts, as its member states. We know that the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the horrific and destabilizing conflicts that we've seen in the Middle East have both caused destabilization when it comes to UN Security Council work. And unpredictable events, including the recent fall of the Assad government, create opportunities but also challenges for us all. There are, of course, other important files of deep consequence where agreement is, however, within reach and where common ground can be found. For instance, in 2023, in spite of the deep divisions in the UN Security Council, it adopted 50 resolutions. There were a number of unanimously adopted resolutions. Actually, they increased from 66 to 70%, demonstrating that meaningful process is still possible in spite of a challenging context and in spite of what you may see when you look at the media about disagreements are always more attractive to read about in any sort of modern world than the nice stories where we all come together and work together. They don't get the same levels of clickbait, as we all know from our own viewing habits. Now, we might not always agree on all of the details or perceptions of conflict, whether we're talking about the Security Council or merely sitting having a coffee in a room together today. The facts are sometimes contested. The histories are nearly always contested. And you are right. I've had this discussion a few times before where countries have said, you know, the West is hypocritical. You're picking and choosing. You're caring more about Ukraine than you are about Gaza. That's a common complaint. Actually, we do a lot of work behind the scenes in relation to both conflicts. But I would also contend that we are all a little bit picky about which conflicts we choose to care about. The UN is also very active, for example, in Sudan, whose horrific civil war in the last 2 years has claimed tens of thousands of lives, all Muslim lives. And the UK is one of those trying to work behind the scenes for peace in Sudan, including the Foreign Secretary Lamy chairing a Security Council meeting last month, to push for a ceasefire, as well as doubling our aid for those impacted by the war. So I really hope that sitting shoulder to shoulder in New York, the UK and Pakistan can have a chance to work together to support the people of Libya, of Somalia, of Sudan, and in other places across the world. And whilst we can't agree on everything, I hope we can all agree that these conflicts around the world are tragic for all of those involved. As ever, they only bring pain and suffering to ordinary people who just want to go and live their lives, to have a secure roof over their head, to be able to sleep at night without a knock on the door, to be able to express their views, to be able to feed their children, for those children to go to school. Actually, human needs, as Maslow set out in his hierarchy of needs, are in many ways quite basic, and that's what all of us should be able to have access to. And conflicts, of course, consistently challenge the ability of ordinary people to do that. So we all need to do what we can, UK, Pakistan, as allies on the global stage, to urge de-escalation and lasting peace in these conflict areas. We must work together to address conflicts in Africa, in Europe, and in the Middle East, and we must work together to ensure that new conflicts do not emerge and old conflicts do not re-emerge. As UN Secretary General Guterres said of Syria, we must help Syrians build a country where reconciliation, justice, freedom, and prosperity are shared realities for all. And the UK will continue to reiterate the importance of protecting civilians, including minorities, avoiding revenge killings, and moving quickly to an inclusive political transition that is Syrian-led, Syrian-owned, with inclusive and representative governance. In a world that has seen an increase in conflict in the last 4 years, stretching across and within international borders, the number of people in humanitarian need has doubled. A vicious cycle of an unprecedented profusion of conflicts, plus the climate crisis, is now compounding the suffering of some of the most vulnerable people across the world. And as many of you know, Pakistan is a top contributor of UN peacekeeping troops, providing over 160,000 peacekeepers in over 40 peacekeeping missions in 23 countries over the last 5 decades. Pakistan has and continues to make an invaluable contribution to international peace. The wealth of knowledge and experience in peacekeeping operations is extremely expert, and we hope it will continue to be shared more broadly with other nations. I'm just going to pause here and have a bit of a cough and a sip of water, if you will forgive me. As Pakistan prepares to join the Security Council, which, as you know, is responsible for maintaining international peace and security, Pakistan will want to set an example of supporting peace and security within its own very challenging neighbourhood. Pakistan and the UK have much in common, including a shared sense of threats. I'm sure I'm not the only person in this room who's lost many close friends to terrorism, including in Afghanistan. And terrorism continues to take the lives of many people across the region every day, including civilian security forces every single day. As we look towards Pakistan's western border, the UK remains committed to Afghanistan and its people. We remain engaged and concerned by the terrorism threat in and from Afghanistan, and we are deeply concerned by the devastating rollback of hard-won rights and broader human rights concerns. We're particularly conscious of the plight of female Afghans in Afghanistan. Women and girls in particular are having an extraordinarily tough time in that country, as you know. Just this month, of course, we've witnessed further repressive edicts restricting women's fundamental rights in Afghanistan, limiting medical education institutions for Afghan women and girls, with devastating long-term impacts for Afghanistan and its people. I know that Pakistan has been a generous host to displaced Afghans, and I hope it will continue to extend that hospitality. Of course, terrorism is just one challenge we face, requiring global support and sustained cooperation to deliver the change we need for everyone. I actually want to come back to climate change. I've referenced it a couple of times, but it's a topic that I don't think we talk about enough, partly because climate change can quite often feel remote, particularly if you're sat in an urban area, less so if you're in a rural area. But it is, without exaggeration, the single biggest threat facing humanity, posing an existential challenge to humanity on Earth and many other species as well. And time is running out. So to be honest, sometimes I get a little frustrated as a diplomat when we're spending time on protocols and niceties and bilateral irritants and subjects across the world where we just should be coming together and working on the bigger issue that threatens all of us, this climate change, as I mentioned. So just last month, Prime Minister Keir Starmer launched the Global Clean Power Alliance at the G20 because he and the UK want to continue to take a leading role on climate change, because we recognise that the consequences of these climate change crisis impacts on all of us. To combat climate change, we also need to engage and cooperate across the world. Now, we all know the statistics when we come to Pakistan. It's extremely vulnerable to the brutal effects of climate change. You have contributed less than 1% of global greenhouse emissions, although these have doubled in the last decade, but you are also highly vulnerable and highly exposed to a range of climate change impacts, including extreme heat, sea level rise, flooding and drought. You are perhaps less well equipped than you need to be, as I think we all are, to deal with these challenges, and that is something that Pakistan can change. Climate disasters, including 2010 and 2022's catastrophic droughts and floods, are expected to increase in frequency and severity in the coming decades. We know that the 2022 floods caused damages in excess of nearly $15 billion and economic losses also of around the same number. Now, the World Bank estimates that Pakistan will need at least $348 billion by 2030. That's just around the corner. That's only 5 years away. To support climate adaptation, build resilience to climate shocks, and to achieve the transition to a low-carbon economy. Agriculture, livestock and textiles are the backbone of Pakistan's economy, but recent research that the British High Commission published in conjunction with the government of Pakistan shows that by 2050, key crop yields could fall by up to 50%, and vast swathes of Pakistan could become inhospitable for buffalo and cattle due to extreme heat and drought. We quite often think it's floods that are the biggest challenge, but actually the data shows that drought and heat will become the biggest challenge in Pakistan. The same research shows that climate inaction will cost Pakistan $250 billion by 2030 and $1.2 trillion by 2050, equivalent to losses in priority sectors of about 30% of GDP a year. So the UK wants to play our part to help Pakistan mitigate and adapt to climate change. Pakistan's climate challenge requires both public and private sector adaptation actions and mitigation measures delivered together. Public sector money alone is not going to fill those bills. We have to leverage private investment, private capital, both domestically and internationally, to help Pakistan meet this challenge, which is why we have a green-to-green, an end-to-end green investment offer. So the UK is now spending millions of pounds to help communities here in Pakistan that are repeatedly hit by disasters to better protect themselves and to improve water use in communities that are vulnerable to flooding, with a particular focus on Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and in Gilgit-Baltistan. And we have plans to do much more, particularly on climate investment. Alongside Minister Faulkner, I had the pleasure of launching our newest programme in November, CIFPAC, or Climate Investment Fund Pakistan, which is a 40 billion rupee 7-year programme focusing on blended finance to de-risk and catalyse private finance into high-impact climate projects. That's about £108 million as well, focusing on adaptation and resilience to support Pakistan's growth. Because addressing climate change isn't just the task of climatologists and scientists, it requires a whole-of-government approach, an international approach, and a change of mindset. Our concept of security, for example, needs to be much broader. Security should include climate security and the human challenges and global challenges as a result. Day to day, we are all more vulnerable than ever, not just because of terrorism or aggression, but because of pandemics, of natural disasters, food security, of which the UK is playing a leading part. But again, it's still not enough. And climate change, again, lots of work happening, but it's still not enough. The link, however, to economic stability is clear, whether one is living in Multan or Manchester, that we need to get the economics of this right. Climate change, I hope I'll leave you in no doubt, is the biggest threat that we collectively face, and the UK and Pakistan can and will rise to the challenge together. At the heart of the solution, of course, is the vibrant youth of Pakistan in front of me today. I sometimes wonder when we talk about, the youth are the future, and for those of us entered middle age, I sort of feel a bit guilty about this because you are the future, but we're the ones in power. So while we talk about the opportunities of youth and all the great things youth can do, it is actually incumbent upon those of us who hold offices of power to do the best that we can. But I'm struck by the potential of Pakistan's burgeoning youth population to grow the economy and bring fresh, innovative solutions to crises such as climate change. But it's not going to happen automatically. Pakistan's 40% stunting rate that we all know about, the 26 million children who are currently out of school, need to be got back into quality education. There also needs to be more serious conversations about managing the high population growth rate. The UK has found that taking an inclusive approach to human development has stimulated the UK's economy and our societal resilience. And I hope that Pakistan can tap the potential of the girls and boys who flourish when they get to school. And I also hope to see more women in the Pakistani labour force in due course. Now, the UK has often been well known for its education partnership with Pakistan. We're very pleased to have been able to support Pakistan with nearly £1 billion, over 330 billion rupees, over 10 years, to strengthen government systems and to encourage children to come back to school. Even more exciting is the evolution of our partnership with Pakistan to one of mutual exchange. At the centre of our higher education offer are our fantastic long-standing Chevening and Commonwealth scholarship partnerships, through which over 3,500 professionals have studied in the UK at postgraduate level free of charge to them. And these programmes have allowed some of your most talented students to experience the benefits of a UK education fully funded. I hope some of you in the room today may be one or two of those scholars or have experienced UK education in some form. The scholarships that we fund are actually not about the UK, they're about Pakistan. We expect our students, the scholars, to return to Pakistan and play important roles in making their country a better place, because ultimately a better Pakistan will benefit the UK as well, as a better Britain will benefit Pakistan. We value the wealth of these exchanges and the opportunities to enrich lives in both Pakistan and in my own country. An incredible 12,000 Pakistani students are currently studying in the UK across 55 different universities. Our transnational education partnerships, where a Pakistani student studies remotely for a British degree from Pakistan, are growing increasingly popular. And we're keen to stimulate Pakistan's economy through the growth of education providers, such as the UK-Pakistan Education Gateway, which has brokered more than 160 such partnerships to date. The British Council delivers 600,000 examinations annually on behalf of UK boards, facilitating Pakistani students to get high-quality UK educations. But of course, our children cannot learn and flourish without also being healthy, which is why we launched the UK-Pakistan Health Partnership in 2023 to bring the whole of our support to the health sector in one place, including strengthening bilateral exchange of expertise. We had some UK experts out recently very interested in Pakistan's experience in dengue fever. It is sadly due to climate change, a disease that we're now starting to see in the UK, and Pakistan, with more than 20,000 cases a year, has the expertise that we need to learn from to be able to support our own population. We've helped build resilient health systems here in Pakistan, strengthening global health security. We supported family planning, ending preventable deaths through improving universal health coverage, and establishing trade opportunities for health and life sciences, for which Pakistan is ripe with opportunity. We've invested over £300 million, or about 110 billion rupees, in Pakistan health initiatives, over half of which has been spent on primary health care. Our support has helped nearly 10 million women and girls access family planning so they have choice about if and when they have children. We've helped immunise 2 million children, and we've strengthened the federal and local government evidence-based decision-making on health, so those governments are able to have the information they need for them to make the choices about your health. As we've seen with recent epidemics, diseases do not have borders, so we've also been helping Pakistan strengthen its health systems to benefit everybody. To prevent, detect and respond to diseases early, they need to be monitored. And that's why we've helped the government of Pakistan develop and implement the internationally recognised integrated disease surveillance and response framework that operates in 150 out of Pakistan's 168 districts. We've supported a strengthened education system that improves access and learning outcomes with a particular focus on girls and the most marginalised, and our support has been on that end-to-end support on both health and education and climate. But for children to be educated, for children to be healthy, we need a stable and secure world. Events in the Middle East and the war in Europe means that the global war on terror is no longer on the top of leaders' minds. When I go back to the UK, we don't really have that many conversations about terrorism anymore. We talk about state threats, we talk about climate change, we talk about active conflicts. But regrettably, there is a re-emerging trend of increasing terror attacks across the world, including here in Pakistan, which looks set to endure, I'm afraid, with the TTP's resurgence and Islamic State activity increasing locally and internationally, as we saw with its attacks in Russia and in Iran. I obviously strongly condemn continued terrorist attacks, which target, as I say, civilians, police, military, security forces, often bear the brunt of these attacks, but civilians are also badly affected. And my thoughts are with the martyrs and victims of these horrific attacks. So cooperation in countering these terrorist operations, organisations are of course essential. So I'm pleased to announce that as part of our long-standing cooperation, the UK will host the second iteration of the UK-Pakistan Counterterrorism Dialogue early next year in London to work through our objectives and our aims together. Security comes in many guises, but I think one of the key challenges is that short-term perspectives do not always produce the most sustainable solutions, whether we're talking about the potential for radicalisation by the TTP and Islamic State amongst deported refugees, or whether we're talking about climate change. We should always bear in mind the long-term implications, not just the short ones, when we are making policy decisions. But an essential part, as I trailed earlier, of delivering both internal and external security in any country is, of course, a sound economy. And the UK is very encouraged by the economic stabilisation which we've achieved over the last 18 months, that Pakistan has achieved, over the last 18 months. Inflation is down to less than 5%, and Pakistan has managed to achieve its first primary fiscal surplus in over 20 years. UK companies have also reported an enhanced ability to repatriate profits, which is essential for retaining and attracting investors, foreign direct investment, into Pakistan. And the UK is delighted to be an important partner in supporting these reform efforts, both through our contributions to international financial institutions, such as the IMF and World Bank, as well as our extensive technical assistance offering on economic reform. Now, economic reforms are never easy. And first and foremost, Pakistan has rightly made tax policy and administrative reforms top priority. And we strongly encourage the government to follow through with a plan to boost government revenue and increase a level playing field between sectors. As part of this vital national endeavour, all state and publicly owned entities need to have the strongest commitment to being part of the economic solution and ensuring that they pay the taxes they owe. Measures to reduce costs within the power sector are also vital. Renegotiations of Pakistan's IPP contracts might be part of this journey if deemed essential. But to preserve investor confidence as much as possible, our advice is that any renegotiation should set transparent principles to guide renegotiations, and policies should be applied universally across all contracts with IPPs, for which the UK has an interest supporting through our financial investments some of the green growth in Pakistan. And finally, the UK also supports Pakistan's commitment to reduce import tariffs every year from 2025 to 2029. Pakistan has the highest import tariffs in the region, and it's among the top 10% of countries with the highest overall restrictions on trade in the world. These trade restrictions not only push Pakistan's firms' focus on the domestic market, but they reduce their competitive in global markets. The cumulative impact of this means that Pakistan's exports have, as many of us know, stagnated, whilst open economies like Vietnam have been growing their exports by 20% a year for over 20 years. So to help Pakistan get back on its own growth pathway, I've been delighted to see the commitment by this government to stay the course on economic reforms. It is easy to see the green shoots of success on the economy and want to use some of that success to ease the cost of living in the short term. But in the context of heightened fragility in the global and Pakistani economy, full implementation of all reform commitments will be essential. Otherwise, there is a very significant risk that Pakistan will lose access to IMF disbursements, which are essential for economic and national stability. And I know that quite often many countries will say, well, we didn't want to do this, but the IMF made us do it. The IMF doesn't make countries do anything. And one of the things I've been delighted to see with the government is that they have been working with the IMF on the importance of necessary reforms. These are joint plans developed together to look at the long-term stabilisation of Pakistan's economy in a way that is very much needed. And now I think is therefore the time for those with vested interests to realise that working for the good of Pakistan is the most important goal. Ironically, a stronger Pakistan, a stronger economic Pakistan, will provide a better economic environment for those vested interests to make legitimate money and grow in a way that does not stifle others. Political courage will be vital. This means strong communications to the public so they understand what is happening and why, and are bought into tough reforms. And it also means having the courage to course correct when necessary. As an important example, I know the Pakistani IT Industry Association recently suggested that the internet slowdowns posed risks of a mass exodus of IT organisations and freelancers outside the country. So in such cases, it's important that practical solutions are identified. As a strong and historic partner, the UK firmly believes that Pakistan can overcome all of these challenges. And if Pakistan can stay on its course, I have no doubt that this will be a transformational period for Pakistan and its relationship with the UK. The economy, however, is just one part of the solution. In any country, realising economic potential is not just about numbers on spreadsheets. A national mission is required that people get behind, and Pakistan is no exception. To succeed, there needs to be consensus on the reform agenda, but also the enabling environment to allow everyone to contribute to this goal. As pioneers of parliamentary democracy, the UK has a long and proud history of promoting the values of progressive governance. We recognise from our own experience that progress is not linear, and it requires the commitment of all. This year, we watched half of the world vote in what's been named the year of elections. And we've seen elections take place across the globe, including our two nations. When I was based back in Iraq in 2003 as a very young political officer, I was based in the province of Maysan, working with the Marsh Arabs there. And a team of democratic experts visited from the United States. And over the course of the next hour, they lectured the Iraqi Provincial Council about the importance of democracy. They were very inspiring, but they made two fundamental mistakes. The first was that they conflated elections with democracy. They are not necessarily the same thing. And secondly, they simply didn't understand their own audience. And afterwards, the engineer Ibrahim, the chair of the council, said to me, what's this democracy thing that they keep talking about? And I said, look, don't worry about it. The important thing is that the people have a voice, that the people who are representing the people do represent all of those people, and that the council works for the good of everybody in an accountable and transparent manner. And he said, oh, okay, well, I mean, we do that all the time. That's not a problem. Accountability, transparency, representing all of our people, that's what we do. And I said, yes, that's essentially what we're talking about. But then I did have to point out that I think there was only one woman on the entire council. So representative of 50% of the population, less so, perhaps the other 50%. But the basics of any sort of progressive governance require, as that chief and I discussed, accountability, transparency, representation and participation. And the stronger a country is in those four areas, the stronger it will be as a country. On average, the more open a society is, the higher the levels of economic growth, the higher the levels of accountability and justice, and the lower the levels of corruption. And the more inclusive a society is, the more open it is. Societies with civic spaces and space for debate help ensure that governance systems are responsive to citizens' needs, that they are capable of meeting the needs of those citizens, and they are accountable to the citizens whose lives they affect. The UK is proud to support governance and accountability in partnership with parts of Pakistan. We have delivered technical support with provincial governments in Punjab and KP to help improve their ability to deliver for citizens. Technical reforms that we have supported have freed up billions of rupees in education budgets that are now used for hiring teachers, scholarships and textbooks. Revenue and pension reforms have created much needed fiscal space to the tune of 1 trillion rupees. And underpinning these technical reforms is that focus on building greater accountability through government systems, ensuring the systems are ready to face the challenges that Pakistan faces. But open societies are not built through technical changes alone. Tolerance is at the heart of advancing and defending free expression and assembly, rights to which Pakistan recommitted recently at its International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights Review. Resisting censorship, restrictions of speech, and harassment of journalists helps make societies more resilient. But this is not a straightforward era. This is not straightforward in an era where misinformation can be easily pervaded. The UK has faced its own difficulties in dealing with the malign effects that new technologies, exploited by pretty much everybody, can have. And I appreciate that it is a very fine balance to work out how to balance the freedom of expression with tackling misinformation across the world. And that's why all countries should redouble their efforts to build in necessary safeguards whilst defending the fundamental freedoms that allow our societies to thrive. As we endeavour to work together and further strengthen the friendship between our countries, the UK offers whatever support we can in contributing to your goal of an economically diverse, dynamic, vibrant, inclusive and open Pakistan. In conclusion, our shared history reflects our close relationship. As we look to continue to strengthen the partnership, it's essential that we all continue to adapt to the modern world in which we find ourselves. History may be our shared bond, but the future provides the key to our success, and we must focus on promoting education, science, technology, innovation, and most importantly, preventing climate change from threatening all of us. And when this is achieved, Pakistan and its relationship with all countries, but particularly the UK, will truly thrive. Now, I'm often asked what the UK's hidden agenda is in Pakistan. What's our secret agenda? I'm going to share the secret agenda with you today. Are you ready? Our hidden agenda is that the UK government wants to see Pakistan succeed. It is as simple as that. We want Pakistan to thrive economically for the benefit of all of its people. We want to see Pakistan fulfill the potential we know it has in all areas of life. And, like all of you here today, we want to see Pakistan as a global leader guided by its own principles. And as has always been the case, the UK remains a steadfast friend of Pakistan despite the challenges that we face. The UK remains committed to supporting Pakistan to realise its full potential for its people, the region and the world. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, ma'am, for your enlightening discourse. Now we will open the floor for question and answer session. I would request the audience to please keep your questions short and brief so we can accommodate as many questions as possible. Please, sir.
Madam High Commissioner, I am a retired Pakistani ambassador and I run a sister think tank, the Center for International Strategic Studies with IPRI. Now, very interesting presentation made by you, madam, and I had heard about you from my good friend Adam Thompson. So I'm happy to be here and to listen to you. The thought that came to me, that your topic says two things: diplomatic reflections and Pakistan-UK relations. You have talked very comprehensively about Pakistan-US relations and made some very cogent points. But I want to take you back to diplomatic reflections. And I want to ask you, what are your thoughts about Britain leaving Brexit? Britain leaving the European Union and the Brexit step that you took. I think Pakistan has on our part, we have benefited because trade has been direct with you, not through the quotas of the European Union and all that. But I want to hear what you would like to say about it. So that's my question.
The danger there is I'll talk too much, and I'm very keen to hear the questions from our audience here. But please say hello back to Adam, one of the High Commissioners of the UK many years ago. Diplomatic reflections. I was conscious that I could talk for hours about this, and I will make one point more generally. But in terms of the UK leaving from the EU, as I said, it's about progressive realism. So we have left the EU. We are not returning to the EU. But what this government has made very clear is that we want good and close relationships with the EU. And my sense is that EU members very much feel the same way. So our relationship between them continues to strengthen on a daily basis. It continues to be very pragmatic, and we have very much shared interests and values. So we are working our way through some of the pragmatic challenges of Brexit, including the enhanced paperwork that I know impacts many businesses. But it was a decision that was made, it's a decision that was implemented, and we are working through that close relationship with the EU. The continent is our neighbours. They're always going to be our best friends. Our bestest friend, Ireland, is sat just behind you, the ambassador to Ireland on the road behind. The diplomatic reflection I did want to make, and 25 years makes me feel very old, but I know there's even more experience in this room today from a lot of ambassadors, many of whom who've written memoirs and could make great reflections. But my biggest reflection right now is that I'm inherently a liberal with a small l, or you could call me a conservative with a small c. But I basically believe that the international institutions, our national institutions, are fundamentally good things, and I want them to evolve and reform incrementally. The challenge that we have today is that a lot of people are disillusioned with the status quo, and there are lots of ideas that are attracting populist agendas, whether we're talking about the US, continental Europe, Asia, South America, where people are coming in with big, bold, populist ideas, sometimes negative, sometimes framed in a positive way. And these very simple ideas are attracting a lot of attention. And I think it's incumbent on those of us in the room who identify as liberal with a small l or conservative with a small c, to come up with some big, bold ideas that are as attractive to people who are disillusioned as some of those populist ideas. And we're too comfortable in our liberal/conservative bubble, but we need to get out there and we need some big ideas to show the populations across the world that we can think big and we can deliver big. Thank you.
Thank you, High Commissioner. Very impressive presentation you made regarding Pakistan-UK relations. If I take you back, say, 1947 before, British United Kingdom had the longest memory of the region, South Asia, Afghanistan included. And you fought shoulder to shoulder with the United States and other NATO members in Afghanistan post 9/11. But what now I see is, ever since the withdrawal of the US and NATO troops from Afghanistan, UK's role is not to be seen. Somehow it is absent. And reason why I say this is because right now the dispensation in Afghanistan faces isolation. But they are a reality. And the British realism that when you were in the region before 1947, you were negotiating with the same hardliners, same Taliban, rather worse than the existing dispensation in Kabul. But you were dealing with them. And you continued to deal with them for over a century before you left the region. But what has happened that you have just given up? there was a brief period in, say, 2010 when the British, with Pakistan, we endeavored to bring in the word reconciliation in the London Declaration of JCMB. You served in Afghanistan. So JCMB is a forum, and then UK was hosting that. So 1st March 2010 declaration, first time, talks about reconciliation. And from then onwards, reconciliation started beginning from Doha, allowing Taliban to have their mission in Doha, onwards talks started. So the issue is right now, after the withdrawal, British role is not to be seen. Is there any reason? Because whatever you can do can be much more substantial in terms of, because of your memory of the region, your memory of the dispute also. And I remember that the British used to rely, Americans used to rely on the British advice. But are you giving that advice for interaction with the Taliban? Or you have stopped doing that, or you are opposed to that? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think a lot of us gave huge portions of our lives to Afghanistan, and Pakistan, as its neighbour, is much more aware and involved in that than anybody else. So I have to say, after the fall of Kabul, I definitely feel in our capitals as though there was a sense of what was all this for? What was all the blood and sweat and money that we invested in Afghanistan for when the troops fled, the government did not stay the course, the institutions that had looked reasonably robust were not as strong as we thought. And I have to confess, I'm not prone to depression, but I definitely had a low moment over that and all that I and my friends and many other people had done, the sacrifices, the lives that had been lost. And an Afghan friend said to me, "Oh, Jane," he said, don't. He said, "Don't. We, Afghanistan, had the best opportunity of a lifetime, multi-generational lifetime to do something with our country. And many of us did, and many ordinary people had better lives as a result. But ultimately, those institutions failed because of Afghan decision-making." So the UK, I think, like many of us, did indeed take a step back after the fall of Kabul, partly because we had invested so much and our investment had gone so very badly wrong. But we are still there, and we are still very, very much invested in the success of Afghanistan as a stable country. We are not vocal about it because this is harder to do, but we are one of the biggest humanitarian supporters of Afghanistan. We regularly meet with government officials in Doha. Our ambassador, our acting ambassador, Sharjah, is in fact currently in Kabul today, meeting with government officials. And if you can set us up meetings with Kandaharis, we'll talk to the Kandaharis. But we're still very much there, very much invested in the success, because we also know how much the success of Afghanistan is important to the stability and security of Pakistan, who is one of our longest standing partners. Thank you. There's a very keen young man at the back with a red jumper.
Hi, Ambassador. My name is Omar. I am final year law student. I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciation for the outstanding effort you and your team are doing on social media to showcase the Pakistani culture, as I follow British High Commission on social media. My question is, what effort can we expect from the British High Commission to facilitate a visit from the UK Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary to Pakistan so that it can be better like it? And the second question is, just like Ambassador Durrani, what efforts are British doing on the border region for our troops so that our troops cannot die due to cross-border attacks? So some sort of top border technology and night goggles or some sort of things so that we can stop cross-border terrorism from Afghanistan. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. I would love to see the Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary here. Every time there is a bidding round, and the way it works is every sort of 6 months or so you get a note that says, would your countries like to bid, and by countries they mean the High Commissioners, ambassadors, because in London I'm seen as Pakistani, of course. Would your countries like to bid for a visit? And every 6 months I make someone like Zoe do a very detailed bid about why they should visit, and I'm optimistic that perhaps we may get the Foreign Secretary in the next year or so. I think the Prime Minister has got a lot to focus on domestically at the moment, so it will be a little bit trickier to get him here. In terms of effort on the border region, so we work closely with the Pakistani military on issues such as counter-IED training. We've put a lot of investment into that, on medical training, but particularly the most basic medical training, because quite often the deaths on the front line are due to an absence of things like tourniquets or knowing how to apply tourniquets. So we're putting a lot of effort into medical training. You mentioned night vision goggles. We have supplied some of those to the Frontier Corps, for example, through various programs. So there's pragmatic work that is going on to support the forces here on the border. The constant thing we have to bear in mind is to ensure that any support that we do is human rights compliant. And that's a key part of our requirement and accountability in all of our programs. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. This is Mateen Haider, a journalist and anchor. So as you expressed deep satisfaction on prevailing situation in Pakistan, functioning democracy, very active parliament, active political system. But very respectfully, you and along with your certain other colleagues from Western countries have been quite active in some sort of diplomacy or lobbying to get Imran Khan out of the jail. So would you like to break silence on this particular matter, that is Khan's release from the jail is imperative for Pakistan's political stability? So if so, please elaborate on this particular thing. Thank you so much.
Trust a journalist to ask the question that he wants to get the headline out of. Absolutely. Look, countries' legal systems are not for another country to interfere with or express an opinion on. It is for legal processes of that country to work through those issues. And what I would hope is that all legal processes are worked through quickly, fairly, and transparently to come to resolutions on all cases of people who are held in detention. That's not quite a headline, I'm sorry, but what do you expect me to say here?
Your Excellency, you have talked about progressive liberalism, and you also hinted at Westminster model of democracy. But if you see in a year or so, there have been more than 60 elections worldwide. And out of that, the Westminster the democracy seems to be sliding more towards protectionism, far right, extremism, and authoritarianism. So how would you like to reflect on that? And what would be your take on the trial and tribulations of democracy in Pakistan, especially after the February 8 elections? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can tell the tough questions have now started. I was expecting this from the younger segment of the audience, though. Yeah, well, I think the UK, certainly the UK is very worried about democratic backsliding across the world. Our belief, and there are other beliefs out there, there are other ways of doing things, but as Churchill and others said, democracy is the least worst of all forms of government. And with democracy, the idea that you have a representative who holds you hold the representative accountable, who makes laws that benefit the whole of the country, where you are able to have free debate and civic space, where you can put up good ideas and bad ideas and debate them freely without repercussions. We think that's incredibly important for a healthy society. And I think all of our countries are working out how do we do that in a world of social media, where there are people who spend their time being professional trolls. Bot farms are set up outside Moscow to attack people. So I think we haven't worked out as democracies how to contend with the world of social media. Inherently, it should be a good thing, a platform for expression, but quite often it becomes a platform for hate and misinformation. So we've all got a job to do as democracies to work out how to balance that. But I do think that ability to debate with fear of repercussions is inherently important to making good decisions, to making good laws. I know that when I, want to make a decision in my embassy, and I've only got 600 people, I can have a very strong view about something, but I'll ask Zoe what she thinks. I'll consult with our staff associations because they know more detail than I do about particular things. And at the end of it, when I make a rule, whether it's on something practical, like the use of the swimming pool, or something like, the future direction of our policy, I want to utilize all of that expertise. And I think countries are no different. There is so much expertise out there. Listen to it, hear from it, make better judgments as a result.
Thank you, High Commissioner. This is Shiraz Sheikh. I'm a researcher here at IPRI. I have two very small questions. Thank you for, first of all, thank you for the all-encompassing speech. And I have had the privilege to benefit from the UK educational system. The first question is about the far right again. As you know that the recent riots in the south part, which were based on misinformation. So what is being done to cater to that issue of misinformation? As you know that social media has been a main tool of misinformation, and that led to the riots and violence against so many immigrants that were not part of any of the issues that were happening in the UK. And the second question is about the Afghan refugees that are still awaiting relocation to the UK. Recently, the total number of Afghan refugees that are to be relocated to the Western nations is 44,000. And among those 44,000, 1,000 are still awaiting to be relocated to the UK. So what's the update on that, if you can provide? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Zoe did actually put a bit about Southport in my speech, and I was like, no, people won't be interested in that, and tuck it out. I apologise, Zoe, you were right. This is what I mean. You should always consult widely and listen to the experts. Southport was utterly horrific, and it was a very quick conflagration, and it seemed to come out of nowhere, but actually it didn't come out of nowhere. It came from years, frankly, of communities in the UK not feeling bought in. It came out of resentment. It came out of othering, by which I mean, of course, people who look differently from you are seen as getting a better deal in some sort of way, which is not true, but is the perception that people had felt because, the UK, like many countries, has had a squeeze with the cost of living. It's, had economic setbacks, including in COVID, that it is still working through. But the violence against the immigrant community in particular, who had absolutely no role in what happened, to remind people, Southport was sparked by a man who was not an immigrant, taking a knife, and stabbing to death four little girls at a Taylor Swift themed party that they were having, that then sparked off riots when the rumour went around that the person who had done the stabbing incorrectly was an immigrant. He was not an immigrant. He was British. The UK government is very much seized, frankly, of some of those wider divisions that we've got in our society, and is working very hard through a community's lens to see what integration looks like, to see what spreading good information looks like, and is particularly looking at angles around Islamophobia and how you can decrease levels of Islamophobia in the UK, and tackling some of those challenges from the far right in particular. So, the UK, like many countries, I think is more polarised than we would like, and it's a whole of UK effort to get us back into a good place. But it ties back into my comments earlier that liberals with a small L, conservatives with a small c, need to come up with better ideas and more simple, bigger ideas that attract people, because when people are disillusioned, they'll very quickly swing behind what seems like a simple populist idea. We saw that in 1930s in Europe. There are elements of seeing that again today. Just on Afghan refugees, so my wonderful team have relocated over 9,000 Afghan refugees with connections to the UK since last October alone. We've still got a few more to go, and we have planes flying out every couple of weeks or so, taking these Afghans who very kindly, Pakistan allows them to come through Pakistan, and then we transport them out to the UK. So that is an ongoing effort that continues apace. Thank you.
My name is Fazan Riaz, and I'm a researcher over here at IPRI. My question to you is regarding the free trade agreement between India and United Kingdom, which is projected to be signed by next year. So can you please elaborate a bit on it, as the two prime ministers, they met recently on the sidelines of G20 summit in Brazil, and they talked about extensively on issues ranging from security and emerging technologies. So what is that? And secondly, how Pakistan and UK can enhance their own respective economic ties and boost it, as Pakistan also have a vibrant, diaspora of, as you mentioned, of more than 1.6 million people residing in UK. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the free trade agreement with India is under negotiation, as you know. India is a huge market at 1.3, 1.4 billion people. Frankly, everybody wants a bit of free trade agreement action with India. It is increasingly a key global player. But that doesn't mean at the exclusion of other countries. And one of the things that I have been keen to do since I arrived 18 months ago is to boost Pakistan-UK trade. My team, when I first got here, went, trade is £4.1 billion a year. And I went, that's pathetic. And then I realised that I was not being a supportive line manager. And then I needed to say, well done for all the work that you've done. But £4.1 billion worth exchange of trade between our countries is pathetic. It should be much, much higher. And one of the things that my team have been doing is been working hand in glove, our trade people, with our investment people and our economic development people, to work with the government of Pakistan to help work out where those investment opportunities are, helping Pakistan become a more reliable market. Frankly, we want to see more investment by Pakistani investors, because one of the things that will give you the biggest boost as an international, as an overseas country, is if Pakistanis are investing in Pakistan, then other people will come and invest in Pakistan. So one, we need to see more Pakistani investment in Pakistan instead of buying, yes, very nice houses in London or Dubai, but let's see it invested in Pakistan. Two, we need to see some of those economic reforms happening. And they are happening and they are moving in the right direction, but they need to continue at the pace that they are doing. And we need to see more of an export-led economy in Pakistan to make itself part of that global system. So ultimately, in the long term, I'd love to see a free trade agreement with Pakistan. I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon, but we do have the, I'm looking at Zoe, but there's no reason why she should know this because it's not her area, the DCTFS, some of that sort of acronym, that is basically the agreement that we have with Pakistan that we don't put tariffs on 94% of the goods that Pakistan exports. So in many ways, you've already got the best part of what would be a free trade deal. But I do want to see ways of inspiring greater investment both ways. Actually, there are sort of big textile manufacturers here who are starting to open up shops and factories in the UK. I want to see investment from the UK coming into Pakistan as well. So the potential is there, but it's all about the reliability. And actually, it's also about the reliability of a legal system. So if a business has an issue, that they can go to court and they will get a clear, transparent and fair resolution. And that is very important for investor confidence. Thank you.
We'll take the two final questions.
Good afternoon. Hi, Commissioner. My name is Ikra, and I am a research associate with the Chair International Law here at IPRI. You mentioned climate change a lot during your reflections, so the question that I have is pertaining to that. We currently have the historic climate change proceedings taking place at the International Court of Justice, and both the UK and Pakistan have already given their stance. So what role does the UK see for itself in supporting Pakistan during these hearings and climate change in a general context as well, given Pakistan's vulnerability to the issue? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Naveed Ashraf, a transformational epistemologist, proud to be the member of Ibn Arabi Society, a big think tank being operated from the University of London. Ontologically speaking, you have mentioned
the greatest issue, the climate change, the change in the seasonal patterns, the weather patterns, now as a consequence, traveling towards drought and floods. I think so that the University of London, under the observation and the suggestion of that Ibn Arabi Society that is being led by the University of London, can present some solutions towards climatic restoration, towards preventing these catastrophic devastation. What do you think about it? What are your comments about it? Cecilia Twinch, Mr. Richard Twinch, Dr. Amatullah Armstrong from Melbourne University, they're all working on these ontological issues. Thank you very much.
Excellency, I'm Dr. Rashid. I'm Director Research here at IPRI. Since the topic is about Pakistan-UK relations, a large segment of our population is very emotive about the humanitarian tragedy unfolding in Gaza. 45,000 dead and more counting. I think this is not only a humanitarian issue, it's become an international community's involvement issue also. The issue of moral legitimacy of the whole international order. ICJ, ICC judgments, they're very explicit, but they have all come a cropper. And what role do you think countries like UK, which have a very strong relationship with the United States, play in averting this tragedy?
Thank you very much. I know that was our last round, but we've actually only heard from one woman, and I would love perhaps a final round of women if you've got questions to put your hands up on afterwards. Not least because I'm not going to properly answer the question that our female member of the audience has asked so far on the ICJ and climate change, partly because I know that's quite a nuanced issue, and there was a report in Cable In from London over the weekend that I have failed to read, so I don't actually know what our position is. And wouldn't want to get it wrong on a public stage. But give your card to Zoe afterwards, and we can debrief on that. But fundamentally, and going back to your points, I'd love to hear more about the work the University of London is doing. I have quite a large climate team that's plugged into many of the universities, including, I think, the University of London, looking at those innovative solutions on climate change. So some of them are going to need to be very big picture. Some of them are going to need to be more local-based solutions. So, for example, our work in Gilgit-Baltistan is very much about local adaptation, but elsewhere it might be about the wider climate investment. So the Zephyr wind farm that we have supported, solar farms, etc., conscious that energy and transmission is quite a political issue in all countries, not just in Pakistan. But I'd love to hear more about the work that you're doing with the University of London. On Gaza, I thought this was going to be the first question. The first question I usually get asked is either Gaza or Kashmir in these audiences. I mean, what is happening in Gaza is an absolute tragedy. And it goes back to the comments that I was saying about it's the ordinary people who suffer. My previous posting was Kenya, and you're probably aware of the East African proverb, when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers, i.e. it's the ordinary people that suffer on this. So the role of the UK very much, and it's not just about Gaza now, it's obviously much, much wider and has been for some time across the Middle East. The UK's role is very much working behind the scenes with the main players. Our Foreign Secretary, our Prime Minister, our Defence Secretary are constantly in and out of all the Arab capitals, in and out of Tel Aviv. To look at solutions, supporting a two-state solution, sustained solution, ceasefire, return of hostages, and getting humanitarian aid, particularly into Gaza. And I think what we've also seen with Syria and the events there is that these things can continue to grow. And to be honest, talking to colleagues in Lebanon who are just at the phase where they're like, okay, we've got a ceasefire agreed with Israel, we can see how things are going to calm down. We can actually see opportunities now in many ways to have greater Lebanese control over its territory. Syria has happened, great relief and celebration, but also, as we saw in Libya, the potential for fragmentation and getting things worse. So the UK is very, very active behind the scenes, working with all partners. You'll have probably seen our Foreign Secretary's comments that we're in touch with members of HTS who have now taken control in Syria, because fundamentally we believe at the end of the day you have to talk to everybody, whether that's all the political parties in a country or the key parties in a conflict. You need to be able to have those relationships to encourage and broker solutions. Thank you. Any women?
I would look at the, no, it's good afternoon. It's Mariam, and I'm a research officer here at Islamabad Policy Research Institute. I really stand educated. My question is because you have heralded to populism a lot in your discourse. So it will be, do you think it is high time that we should now start thinking about populism more, not as a thin ideology, but as a thick ideology? Because as we see, communism and fascism also doesn't have a strong historical background, didn't have a strong historical tradition. Right now, if we see the result and impact of populism it had around the world, including Pakistan and UK and Latin America and in USA and India. So do you think it is high time that we should start taking it not as a weak and a transient force, but we should take it as a thick ideology, as Friedman has said? Thank you so much.
Ladies. Okay, we'll conclude with that very, very good question about populism. I think with populism it's I don't see it as an ideology in and of itself, because you can have far right populism, far left populism. You can have populism that actually isn't really sure what it is. And I think that's the challenge I see with many forms of populism across the world, that they are negative things. They are against something. Or they are about promoting particular sections of society. And there aren't many populist agendas that are, hey, this is how we're going to create a great country for all of our people and have great neighbourly relations. Partly because that's too nuanced, and part of the attraction of populism is its big, bold, strong ideas that you almost can't disagree with in some ways, but quite often are negative ideas. So, you know, in the UK, the Prime Minister has just come out and said, look, the state is not working as well as it should do. Well, that was one of the populist cries. So actually the Prime Minister has now owned that. And the Prime Minister of the UK has said, we're not working as well. Civil servants in particular are not delivering for the UK public as much as they need to be. So in many ways, I see populism is such a diverse field. It's about how do you channel that into positives. How do you, as those in power, hear the ideas of populism and work out how you can address those concerns? Because quite often those big ideas, those radical ideas, are expressing basic dissatisfactions with people being unhappy that they're not getting that basic hierarchy of needs that we talked about, that people are struggling to pay rents, people are struggling to survive economically, people are struggling to send kids who've had a good breakfast to school. So I think because populism is such a broad range, it's in many ways hard to give it its own ideology, but I think it definitely has themes in there that can be a powerful force for good, but quite often are also negative forces. So perhaps we can, over a cup of tea, we can expand on that a little bit more, because I'd love to hear your ideas. Thank you.
Thank you for your engaging questions and valuable comments. I now request President IPRI, Ambassador Dr. Raza Mohammed, to deliver his vote of thanks.
Our Excellency, we are very grateful, and thank you so much for such a comprehensive talk, covering a wide range of issues like terrorism, education, climate, women education, democracy, misinformation, disinformation, pandemics, which are send borders. Yes. Thank you so much. About the education in Afghanistan, the women education in Pakistan, Pakistan has made some contribution. The Ambassador Durrani is sitting there. Pakistan was successful in bringing 1,500 girls from Afghanistan on scholarship with their mahrams, so to say. to Pakistan, and mashallah, they are studying it. And you're very right that if the girls don't study, what is going to happen to the education of the girls, the nursing, the medicine, groomers, trainers, and so many other things. So it is a very, very important issue. I think we all should keep trying to convince, although they say it is a cultural issue and all that, but whatever we can. About Gaza, thank you so much. You were very candid during your speech also and answered the question also. It is a human catastrophe which is going on. Everyone acknowledges, and most of the countries do acknowledge this, that this is a kind of genocide which is going on and all that. But no one is trying to stop it, especially the biggest power of the world today, the United States of America. I think if they want to, they could give it a push, but it is expanding, and now devastation and death and killing has spread over to the Lebanon and now to Syria as well. The stability, the arc of stability is actually ballooning, is increasing. I think about the common threats, Mariam also pointed out, I had also written this, that the extremism, racism, nationalism or ultra-nationalism, populism and religiosity, they are also, I think, common threat for us all, and we have to look into it. I think, like a very, very seasoned diplomat, you avoided to answer the questions to avoid controversy, and also what I had said about the relationship of Pakistan with the regional countries, and especially the India, to whom you termed as one of the perhaps pole. I think for a pole it is going to be good if they behave more responsibly and resolve their issues with the South Asian countries. There are eight South Asian countries, and none of them has good relations with India. Unfortunately, everywhere it is going down. And my suggestion and worry was that in case if I always give example of the EU. No, it started off with so many wars, killing millions of each other, and where are they now? So it's one country now, like one country, 27 of them, 28th went out. So it can happen, maybe, with some push, with some help. Pakistan needs economic progression for stability, whether it is political, whether other stabilities. And at the moment, the only light visible at the end of the tunnel is CPEC in China. We need it. And we need the West to understand it, that it is not against West, it is not against USA, it is not against India, but it is... but, thank you so much. But I think you need to talk to the friends also in the West. Once again, thank you so much. And because of you, you see the house is full. Who is who from the media is here? The diplomatic community, our own people, youth. There are so many people sitting behind the screens, and they are also on the left side also. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your views very candidly, and thank you so much. And I deeply appreciate your skillful handling of the subject. Thank you so much. God bless you.
I'd like to request President Ipri to please present our esteemed guest with a shield. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the conclusion of today's event.